Great, that's the recording started. So hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from Peoples Postcode Lottery and I am a Community Programmes Officer. I'm really sorry if you can hear that background. There's a really noisy car outside. So I'm one of the Community Programme Officers here at the team. And today I'm just going to talk you through our funding opportunities. Specifically for this area will be called Postcode Neighbourhood Trust. And I will explain as I go on, but we have 6 trusts across the whole of the UK. Different areas have different trusts. They're all the same questions, all the same applications. It's just the way that we distribute funds. For the majority of the call, I think everybody will be in Postcode Neighbourhood Trust, but I will explain if anyone's slightly on the border for other trusts. I have worked at People's Postcode Lottery for almost 10 years now, and I have been in the charities team for 8. My background is more informed development, unrestricted funding and questions, and I have worked in the community programmes team now just gone 3 years. So I support on the application forms, funding workshops like this, kind of creating the questions and doing the assessment. So I should have the answer, and if I don't, I'll be able to get the answer over after the call. There's a lot of information on the slides. I'm happy to send this presentation over to the team afterwards, and it can be sent out and it can be shared for those that have attended or those that couldn't attend today. And it'll have all our contact details on it as well. So don't worry about trying to scribble down notes. If I go too fast, if I talk too fast, I won't be offended. You can just pop something in the chat. What I will say is I'm actually unable when the presentation mode is on is to see anyone. So if anyone is putting hands up or trying to ask a question, I'll maybe just get that at the end if I can't see it. But there will be chances to ask questions throughout the presentation. So to get started, it's worth noting that all our funds are raised by players at the Postcode Lottery. So to date, we've raised over £1 billion for good causes. Thank you if anyone is a player on the call. The area that we're looking at today is Postcode Neighbourhood Trust, so it is what we refer to as the north of England. I don't know if you can see on the map, but the purple area is highlighted as the area that we'll be discussing today. But you can see that if you are anywhere near the kind of boundaries, or if your organisation works across those borders, don't worry, it's still the same details, and I can touch on that if there's any specific questions. So in 2022, Postcode Neighbourhood Trust, we had just over 3.5 million to distribute. That's just slightly increased this year to about 3.7. We made some changes from 2022 to 2023. So we have already had 1 round open. But I thought what would be helpful is if I just kind of give everybody a look at what 2023 looked like. Unsure if anyone on the call has either applied to us before, currently successful or unsuccessful. But again, just to go through what it is we're looking for this year. So the main areas that we're looking to fund are these 7 areas. So the infographics were very large. We needed 2 screens for this, so I can flip back and forward. But the areas that we are looking to work in are providing support to improve mental health, enabling participation in the arts, supporting marginalised groups and tackling inequality, enabling participation in physical activity, improving green spaces and increasing access to the outdoors, improving biodiversity and responding to the climate emergency, and preventing or reducing the impact of poverty. These 7 areas are what we're looking for in all applications. So in our form, you'll be able to pick just one. And I'll go into a bit more detail about the types of funding that we offer, but these are our areas of impact that we're looking for in 2023. To anyone that has either applied to us for funding in previous years, you'll notice that the themes are pretty similar, and we've refined a couple of them, but that's pretty much the areas that we do look at in the community programmes team to work up and down the UK in. So 2023. So this year our community programmes have been able to offer unrestricted funding and project funding. Historically, our team has always been a project funder, and in 2021 we made the decision to move towards offering core funding, and then in 2022 we offered unrestricted funding or project, and this year we have 2 separate application forms. So there is 2 very different paths depending on which funding you'd like to go through. So just to start on project, and it's what we offer. So it's funding from £500 up to 25,000. There is a few criteria bases in that, and I will be able to send our funding guide as well to double check what you're eligible for. So project funding is any kind of specifically programme funding of work. I think that we get a lot of questions sometimes asking if you can have core costs that relate to a project, and you can. So any costs that make the delivery possible. So if that's like a salary of someone doing a specific project, if it's part of the core cost of the electricity of the building where something's going to be delivered, you can apply for any of those costs in the project. This year we are looking to report on who are real living wage funders. That is for our own benefit, but it's not part of the assessment criteria. So if you say no to that, it doesn't mean that you won't be funded. We are working with the real living wage, just trying to see what the landscape is like for organisations that are applying, reasons and barriers that they may have, or who is doing it and who has taken that step. We have also increased our funding up to 18 months for projects. So originally it was 12 months and we've extended that to 18 months. And again, with project funding, we're really looking for a clear cost breakdown and a good alignment with the themes. So one of the 7 themes I mentioned earlier, whatever your programme is, whatever the project that you're applying for, making sure it has a really strong link to that area and that theme that we're looking to fund. We've also increased our character counts for anyone that has been on the application form. We have taken a lot of feedback from previous years, so we've tried to split the questions more evenly to make sure that we can get enough detail. And the way that I always think that makes a really strong project application is when we get our funding applications and any applications that we take to our trustees for decisions, our team need to be able to stand up and verbally tell the trustees who the organisation is and what the project is. And if we're not able to do that, that means that we've not got enough information from the application. So I always say just try and make it as clear and concise as possible. We don't assess based on how well it's written or grammar. A lot of our organisations that applied to us are from non-professional fundraising backgrounds. So it can be as simple as just listing bullet points and using your space wisely. And that is for project applications. Slightly different for unrestricted applications. So funding amounts are the same. However, we will restrict it to not exceed more than 1/3 of your income. So our application form will work that out for you. But if you're applying for the full 25,000, then your income has to be over £75,000. The nature of unrestricted funding is once we grant that to an organisation, the organisation can then spend that on whatever that organisation deems appropriate. There's a real move in the sector, hopefully, towards granting unrestricted grants and letting the charities be able to decide what that funding should be spent on. So therefore, we do have a couple of bits of criteria that will make you eligible or ineligible for unrestricted funding that we wouldn't have on project. The reason for that is there are certain rules that we have as an organisation that we are restricted from our charity commission, so what our objects are. So therefore we cannot fund any international work, so all the funds have to stay in the UK. So if you are an organisation that has any international objectives in your governing documents, do not apply for unrestricted funding. It would make you ineligible. Even if you don't intend for the funds to be used in that nature, just because your organisation is set up to be able to do that, we wouldn't be able to do unrestricted funding for anybody that had international objectives. We also have the same rules for any medical equipment. So if your organisation is has any kind of medical objectives, any medical equipment research, then do not apply for unrestricted funding. Again, we're unable to fund anything medical. And it's the same with any religious aspects in your governing documents. So if you have any kind of promotion of religion or any reference to any religion, our trust, we're not allowed to fund any religious activities. So again, we'd then steer towards project funding rather than unrestricted. Again, we have the same real living wage outcome, and we have increased the funds to be spent within 18 months. Just with the nature of unrestricted, the funding tends to be spent much quicker than the 18 months, but it is up to yourself to say how long that project would be. The main difference between the project and unrestricted successful applications is for unrestricted, we would then look to assess the organisation. So who your organisation is, what its purpose is, why it's set up, rather than the activities of the project. And again, we'd be looking for a really strong link to one of the funding themes. So before you apply for unrestricted funding, have a look at your governing documents and see what your objectives are. And if there's not a real clear link between your objectives, then again, I would recommend that you just apply for project funding. We've had a lot of feedback, certainly with the nature of our unrestricted grants, that sometimes, you know, objectives when they're written, depending on how long ago the organisation is, that can kind of be a bit outdated or they can be a bit vague. Then again, we would advise organisations either make that a priority to update with their trustees or go for project funding. But the strongest unrestricted applications are those that have the real clear link to the funding theme, that their organisation is purposely set up for one of our 7 funding themes. If not, still welcome to have a project application as well. But those are the 2 main differences between the project and unrestricted applications. So both application processes are the same, although there's different questions. The application form is a 1-stage form. It's available online. We will ask for supporting documents, so that's your governing documents, and if they are signed by directors or trustees. It must be in the name of the organisation that you are applying for with clear charitable objectives. And that is for project and unrestricted. So if you're applying under one organisation, you have to submit those governing documents. You can't apply on behalf of another organisation. And we also do look for accounts if you're off the criteria that you need to have them signed by an independent examiner, and that's on an income level. And it depends if you're a year old or if you're less than a year. So new organisations can apply as well, but they would only be able to apply for project. If you are applying for project and you're asking for physical items that are over £1,000, then we'll ask to see a quote. So we'll accept like a screenshot from the website. It can be, an email from a supplier, but those are only for single items that are over £1,000. So we don't need quotes for other things. And we will ask for 2 contactable referees during our application window as well. So they have to be able to know your organisation and know the person applying on your behalf. And we do ask that if you can let the referee know that they are being asked to be a referee. We have quite a short application window to be able to get funds out to those successful applications. So it makes it quicker for us to be able to get that funds out if the referees know that they are being contacted. And one that's really important as well, that at the time that you apply to us, you must have a UK bank account in the name of the organisation with 2 unrelated signatories. We have had a lot of instances this year that organisations have been successful and we've gone to give them their funding agreement and then they don't have a bank account in their name and we've had to withdraw or offer of funding. Bank accounts for all sorts of reasons can be super quick to open or sometimes can be really long. And what we have had cases of we've kept people's money for them and it's carried over into a year. So we do just ask that the UK bank account is in the name of the organisation at the time of application and not to apply if you don't have that organised and set up for whatever reason. So again, I have gone over a couple of these exclusions and I will send our funding guide over so that everyone can have a look through it. But organisations that have received any funding from any of our postcode trusts in the last 12 months, so we do have 6 postcode trusts. So if you do work in different areas and if you've been funded from a postcode trust before, from the date that your last payment was made, you cannot apply within 12 months. I don't think this would be relative to anybody on the call, but any Schedule 3 CICs. Hospices are unable to apply for funding because of the nature of their work. There may be some specific project work we could do, but we would advise to get in touch with one of the team before putting an application in just to check eligibility. Organisations that only have a religious objective in their governing documents are unable to apply for either project or unrestricted. It's not very often, but an organisation may have some religious objects, but then some community work within their objectives as well, and they can have project. But if there is only one object that the purpose of your organisation is to promote religion, then we are unable to fund that organisation for either. And as I mentioned, for the unrestricted funding, there is a 3rd income rule, but the application form will be able to work that out for you. So as you walk through the form and fill out your information, it will give you the option to say you can either have up to £25,000 for project, or you can have up to X amount for unrestricted funding. And again, the form figures that out for you. Here's just a funding timeline that's available on our website, and it kind of gives people a good idea of what does happen. So our applications are submitted. We have an application window of a minimum of 24 hours. They are screened, so we do go through eligibility, we do go through our criteria that's all publicly shared, and they do start assessments. We then send these to our board of trustees, and our trustees approve all of our funding. So they'll read the applications. If they have any questions, they go back and forth. And then the organisations that are successful will be told within 4 weeks. All organisations are actually told within 28 days from submitting their application. The ones that are successful will then be given a funding agreement. We'll have that checked by finance, and within the 4 weeks, the grants will be paid. So from submitting your application to being successful and paid is within 8 weeks. But as I said, decisions will be made within 4 weeks, so you would know if you were successful or not successful. So what we have opportunities remaining for 2023. So actually our next funding round is on the 3rd of July. So that's next week. It opens at 10 AM for a minimum of 24 hours. I will share where the application form is, but if you go onto our website, the application form will appear at the top of the page, bang on 10. You can click into it and you can work your way through. It's not a particularly long form. And what we do say is our application questions are available now on a Word document on the website. So our project and unrestricted questions are there. And we do recommend that if you are going to apply, that you work on the Word document first. You check things like your character count, make sure that you've got all the information you need from different parts of the organisation, or if someone needs to check over it, because we don't actually have a save functionality on our forms. So once you open the form, that is you're in the form, and if you close it before you submit, that form is lost. We don't have access to it on the back end. What I will say is once you're in the form, so if you do open it at say 11 o'clock on Monday the 3rd, you won't be timed out. So do try and submit as soon as possible, just in case you have any internet issues or any other technical problems. We wouldn't have access to it, but you don't have to panic and rush once you're in there of copying and pasting. So the next round is on the 3rd of July, and then there is another opportunity on the 4th of September. Organisations are able to apply a maximum of twice in 2023. So if you were an organisation that applied earlier than the year in the April round, which is now closed, and you were unsuccessful, then you could apply in either the 3rd of July or the 4th of September, but not both. So just making sure that if you already have an application in, that you've either received your feedback, if you've called, if you need to talk to someone beforehand, or you're welcome to apply on the 3rd of July. If you are unsuccessful, each organisation will have tailored feedback. So every application is assessed and reviewed. In all areas, we leave feedback in each section, and we will put that in an email to you, so it's quite detailed. If for whatever reason that's not clear, or you would like further information, then you can arrange a call by either just replying directly to that email or just contacting us in the inbox. We're a fairly small team, so anyone's happy to jump on a call, talk through your application, give you points on what we were looking for or what we weren't looking for. And then you're more than welcome to reapply again at a next date. These are our details for Postcode Neighbourhood Trust. So that is the website where our application will be posted on the 3rd of July. And that is our email address that you can email if you need, or if it's easier just to jump on a phone call. If you do email, I think you will get an automatic message that says we'll reply within 3 to 5 days, but we're much quicker than that. It'll usually be same day, or if you've emailed us later on in the day, it'll likely be next morning. But if it is something urgent, then we do just say jump on a call. That being said, if you do email us on Friday to discuss or to try and book in some feedback call, and when we go live on Monday, then we wouldn't be able to guarantee that we could catch up with you or chat to you beforehand. So we do just say as quick as possible, get in touch when you need to. That is my last page, and I can see there's quite a lot going on in the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then jump in the chat box. But I'm also happy just to take any questions if anybody wants to. Don't know how to end my stop sharing. There we go. Questions. So let me just find the chat and I'll go up to the top. Fab. Okay, these are all just people saying hi and hello. But great. So what's a Schedule 3 CIC? So the way that your CIC would be set up will be in your governing documents. Schedule 3s are if the directors, shareholders, or anyone else in the company is able to take profit out of the organisation for themselves. So we won't fund any organisations that are not for profit. We won't fund anybody's extra salaries and so on. So you will have to check your governing documents just to check what type of organisation you are. Schedule 3s are less likely these days, but it does mean that your directors can take not only a salary, but they're also allowed to take the profit out of the organisation, which we would not then fund. But do have a look in your governing documents to make sure you can see what type of organisation you are. We will check at our end as well. We have a due diligence process, but it may affect either your eligibility, the amount of times that you applied to us, or even how much money you can apply for on the form. If you click the wrong options, the form will work out based on what you tell it. It's a very sophisticated form. Yes, so salaries for directors are okay. Salaries, so there's a lot of controversy around how much a salary can be for a CEO and directors and senior peoples. We have no say or preference over that. So we have a lot of trust on the organisations that they hire the best placed people. We're not the experts in any of these areas. So we do often see salaries for either CEOs, directors, or other senior team members. It's not an issue. What we would say to make sure that's a really strong application is really evidence how that person's salary is going to either help your organisation achieve what it's looking to achieve, if it's unrestricted, or if it's a project cost, in what way will that salary help whichever one of our funding themes that you've selected. So a real clear link, but we often do fund salaries and director salaries.
Lindsay, I've got one or two
Yeah.
whilst the questions are still coming in. People are sending them directly to me. So somebody's asking, do I need to be a charity with a charity registration number, or do you accept community groups with a bank account?
Great. So voluntary community groups, yes, as long as you have your governing documents and you're a not-for-profit. We also have organisations just with asset locks. There's a whole range of organisations that we will support, and that's in our funding guide. We've tried to break it down into as many as possible, but sometimes there's a little difference on terms depending on where you're based around the country. But yes, voluntary groups can apply for funding, making sure that that bank account is in the name of the group.
So alongside that, they're also asking, once they're a voluntary group, they won't necessarily have funds signed off by an independent. So how can they still apply, basically?
So your account. So if your organisation's income is less than 25,000, you don't have to get them signed by independent examiners. So our form will ask you even to update. So new groups often just give us like expenditure income. So like a forecast or projecting if you're early, the form will let you know that. So we don't need them if your organisation's income isn't over 25,000. That's okay.
And then to add to that,
no, keep going. This is great.
The following question asks, if I only have 25,000 in our account, can I apply for the full 25,000?
So with project, yes. So if you were applying for a project cost, then there'd be no restriction. If it was unrestricted and you only had 25,000, depending on where you were. So if you were in your first year, you couldn't go for unrestricted funding. If you were, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky. If you were just past your first year, but you hadn't, because you get 18 months to do your first set of accounts, then no, we would need a set of accounts. If it was 25,000, here's my bad maths here, divide that by 3, you would get the amount on the form.
7, isn't it?
Yeah, like 7,000. So what our form will figure out is, because we didn't want people to go, we want unrestricted funding, and get to the end and you could only apply for £7,000, but you could have had 25,000 for the project. So right at the start of the form, we'll ask quite a few questions on your organisation, and then the form will say what you're eligible for, and then you can pick which way that you go. So you'll either pick the £7,000 for unrestricted, or you can pick up to 25 for project.
Right, so people really need to think about what they really do want,
yep,
and whether or not they're going to create a project or actually go with unrestricted funds. So, for example, as you mentioned before, if I was looking for salaries, would £7,000 be enough for that salary? Do I need to go for the unrestricted and get the 7,000, or should I go for a project and get some more, basically? Definitely. So people really need to think that through rather than just making the application.
And I think one of the things as well, just to be, I think when we do a lot of work on language, and sometimes people think project is, I need to do this one very specific project, but just understanding what project means, it can be anything really that your organisation does as a project. So if it is someone's salary, you can still apply for £25,000 on the project. The project may be, it doesn't have to be something your organisation is delivering, is what I'm saying. And I think sometimes people get a bit confused by that, and that pushes them towards the lower amount with unrestricted, but you're welcome to apply for project.
Thanks for making that clear, because that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
To be honest, because I think most people would think, well, salaries are restricted, and you wouldn't want to hear that they're asking for a salary. Yeah. But if they present their project strong enough, then the salary matches that.
And it's the same with core costs. If you need, running costs, the electricity, the rent, to be able to deliver the programme, that is still a project cost. So anything that helps the delivery of the programme, we can ask for it in a cost. But yeah, you're right. It's how you articulate that in an application.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any more questions in the chat. I do have 2 more, actually, if there's none in the chat.
I think we're good.
Yeah, nothing else there. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? I do have some more. Can't see everybody at the moment, actually. Let me change.
Happy for people just to come off mute if anybody wants to just kind of shout out, or I'm also happy to take them on the chat or through.
Yeah, I do have some more questions.
People tend to get a bit shy on these calls.
Imagine that. And then afterwards, they'll be telling us off.
It happens.
Come on, folks, have you got any questions?
But I think people also sometimes worry that they're sitting there saying, oh, I don't want to ask this. And I guarantee everybody else on the call is also worrying. There's no such thing as a silly question.
Wanting to ask the same question.
Yeah, they do. And I think things sometimes are really super overcomplicated depending on where you are in the UK, how you're set up. Sometimes the person applying for funding, and we often see it because they're not from that kind of professional background, haven't seen their governing document, aren't that close to their trustees. So that's why we try and have these chats. And it really helps us frame like our funding guide or our funding rounds when we get these really good questions from applicants to go, actually, that wasn't that clear. Like we thought it was clear, but this is how we get the feedback. So they're really important to us as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so I've got 3 questions here. And I think you've answered these, to be honest. How many rounds of funding do you have throughout the year, and when are the next funding rounds? I think you said already.
Yeah, so we had 3. We had 3 this year for Postcode Neighbourhood Trust. The next one is on the 3rd of July. But again, on the first question on our application form on the website one will be to type in your postcode of the area of work, and it will just tell you which trust that you have to go to. So there may be a case that if your work is out with Postcode Neighbourhood Trust, you may get a different date. But I think most of the people will be in that area.
Okay, brilliant. Second one is, can I apply to the People's Postcode Lottery, Postcode Community Trust, Postcode Local Trust, Place Trust, Society, Neighbourhood Trust? So can I apply to all of them, basically?
Good work for naming all 6. So no, so do only apply to one of our trusts, because if you do apply to multiple trusts, it will make your application ineligible. Even if your area of work covers Wales, Scotland, and different parts of England, please do just apply to one trust. Whilst all our trusts are independent and each one is its own organisation, it's the same team that's assessing it. We all work for People's Postcode Lottery. There's 4 of us, so if we do see the same name coming up, unfortunately, we have to make them ineligible, and it will take one of your times away. So just apply to one trust at a time. If you are successful, then you have that 12-month rule of being funded. If you're unsuccessful, it doesn't make a difference which trust you apply to. There's no better chance with any other trust.
Right. So basically, realistically, the offer is £25,000 per annum. And that's really it, isn't it?
Up to 25, yes, whatever it is you need. Yeah.
Rather than making that application to all the different trusts. Okay. And the final question that I've got here is, what type of projects can be funded, and what's the time period any project can be funded for?
Right, so in terms of eligibility, so as long as it wasn't international, medical, or religious, any project, and we have seen them all. Very rarely will we be surprised. We do have 1 or 2 each round where we go, oh wow, that's new. But in terms of projects, whatever your organisation needs, as long as there's a strong link to one of our funding themes, so those 7 themes, then how you do that project is up to you. And please do entertain us. We love to hear what other organisations are doing. We say you can have up to 18 months. Most people choose within 12 months, 6 months, or up to 18 months, but we'll ask you where your start date is and where your end date is. And we are kind of flexible with that. If there is, certainly after COVID and delays, and if it's a staff cost, trying to hire someone in 12 months seems to be quite difficult. So if there is a delay, you just let us know. We can update on our records. Most of the time, we don't need trustee approval again. So if there's a slight change to the project, or if something didn't work out how you intended it to, you can let us know. All organisations that are successful at the end of their project, whether it's unrestricted or project, you'll receive like a review, a link to an evaluation. It's super straightforward. It's about 3 questions. And once you've returned that, then you'd be eligible to apply for funding again in the future. But you can kind of log if there was any changes there or any challenges. And again, that helps us kind of shape our funding round. So please do complete them. I can see there's a question. Can you remind us when those themes are? Now you're asking me. I'll need to pull that back up. Where's that presentation? So the funding themes, and again, we will be able to share them through. So they're providing support to improve mental health. With that one, please do ensure that it's mental health and not mental well-being. There is a difference. So we're actually looking to work with improving mental health rather than well-being. Enabling participation in the arts, supporting marginalised groups and tackling inequality, enabling participation in physical activity, improving green spaces and increasing access to the outdoors, improving biodiversity and responding to the climate emergency, and preventing or reducing the impact of poverty. I will be able to send our funding guide over with them, and they're all written on it. But those are the ones that we're really looking for quite strong applications. So whatever your project is, you'd have to, and you picked, you know, improving access to outdoor space. How is your project improving access to outdoor space, and so on. Next one, third up application for applying for postcode. Yep, that's great, it's Lesmond. If we're in the first year of operations of our CIC, can we still apply for unrestricted core costs as part of our project? So no, if you're in your first year, which means you wouldn't have submitted any accounts yet, then it would just be project funding. After your 12 months or after your first set of signed accounts, then you can apply for unrestricted funding. So it would be, but you could apply for, depending on what those core costs are, they could technically be project costs. So just because you're applying for project doesn't mean you can't apply for salaries, doesn't mean you can't apply for rent, water, electricity, all that kind of really hard to get funding is still technically project. It depends how you frame it. So I don't know if you can, if that makes sense, or if you had a specific question, then we can take that offline and discuss your application. But within your first year, then unrestricted wouldn't be an option. We'd be looking for project costs only. So the monitor
is asking, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm just running through the list here. So the monitor and evaluation question. So as I mentioned, it's an application form. We'll send you the email when your project's due to finish. You click on a link. If it's project, it will ask you if you spent the funds as you intended. It's a yes, no. If it's no, they just ask you like what happened, what did you end up doing, and then it'll kind of say this is what you said you were going to do. Did you manage to do that? And we'll ask that. If it's unrestricted funding, we are set to change our unrestricted funding evaluation for next year. This year we just ask kind of questions about, you know, was it helpful? Do you have feedback from us as a funder? How did you find spending the funds? So it's very straightforward, and then you submit online, and then that's it done. You'll get an email saying thanks for submitting that. So in terms of monitoring, we do ask that because we fund so many groups, we can't visit everybody. I personally find I get a lot out of going out and meeting groups and seeing what the other groups are funding and how the projects are going. So we may from time to time contact you saying we're in the area. We're all based up in Edinburgh in Scotland, so we do travel up and down the country, and we will contact you to ask if we can either come visit and just double checking, are we supposed to have that screen on?
Yeah,
okay.
So that's coming up for some questions that we're going to ask everybody shortly.
Great, no problem. So yeah, so we may visit if that's helpful, but otherwise we would always be in touch if we did that beforehand. So the themes, application, monitor evaluation, the link before makes sense. Does successful funding relate to participant engagement? Just not 100% sure on that one, Lisa. So successful funding relate to participant engagement in terms of your beneficiaries, if that's the question. We do ask a part in our project applications about how you'd know that the funding is needed. So participant engagement there, like if your service users have said that they need that service, if there's perhaps waiting lists, we will ask that, and that will come across in a project application. For unrestricted applications, because we are looking to assess an organisation, we do look to the strongest applications tend to be the ones that are embedded in the community. They tend to be the ones that have good representation. So leadership teams, trustees, directors have a strong representation linked to who their beneficiaries are, who their community is. We have added a section this year where we ask about leadership, and it's a yes/no question. And whilst there's no assessment criteria on whether you say yes or no, depending then how you answer that question, that we will assess on that. As you can imagine, some groups it's not appropriate to have their beneficiaries as directors. So, you know, if it's a animal charity, and we have had people say, yes, we let our dogs come to trustee meetings and so on, or if it's like a baby group, a toddler group, they're not represented there. But we do kind of ask what the engagement is from the groups. I hope that answers your question, Lisa, but if it doesn't, just drop another one in the chat.
Yeah, I think she said yes, that you were traveling in the right direction. So yeah,
Okay.
It was that participation from groups. You said about trustees. How would you express the engagement of trustees, etc.? How would you express that in your application? Is there room in an application for that to be expressed?
So yeah, our last section in the application form is called People in Leadership, and this may not be verbatim, I don't have the application to hand, but we basically say that we're looking to fund organisations that are embedded in the community. It's in our strategy as a community funder. I'm based in Edinburgh. I am not from Manchester or Cardiff or London where we fund. So we really do put the onus on the applicant to be able to convey the challenge in their area and why they're working on that. And to help us get that full picture, there's a section that says, is anyone in your do you have a leadership team? And by leadership team, we can mean some organizations have trustees, directors, CEOs. Some people just have a volunteer manager, 2 or 3 people in the group. And regardless of size, do the people that are running the organization represent the community they're set up for? And I guess, you know, we don't want to fund any group, regardless of what their beneficiaries are, if the right people aren't there, because we believe that the people that are representing make the best choices. If you don't represent, then how do you know what's best for your community? So there is an area that'll say yes, no, and then I'll ask you to kind of explain what the representation is. One of the things that it's been answered not well, so I do think we're going to try and add a question to say, who are your beneficiaries? Is it the older group? Is it a young football team? Is it whatever your beneficiaries are? And are they represented at your leadership team? And sometimes the answer is no. There is some very valid reasons why that answer is no. And then you can explain that section there. But again, we kind of want to see what that community is and why the people making the decisions are the people making the decisions.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. So that kind of speaks to diversity, doesn't it, to a great extent. Just a little bit off piece with this next question, and that's roughly, you know, you may not know. So most of the groups here today are African Caribbean communities, and I'm just wondering, by way of representation across the country and those that actually are successful, any ideas in terms of percentages?
So interesting. This is one we've discussed quite a lot. So we as a funder do not ring fence any funding for any groups, and it's just not who we are as a funder, and I don't think it's necessarily helpful as a representation view of any part of the country. So I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland, and the diversity in Edinburgh and Scotland is much different from Glasgow, which is only an hour away.
Right.
And because of our nature, we are a community funder. We will fund community groups, and what those communities look like are different in every area. So therefore we don't ring fence. We do not say, and we don't really like to say either that we funded X amount in this area or those kind of groups. What we will say is, though, and we've noticed a difference, is if there are any particular challenges that any group find, I think we need to be aware of that as a funder. So I think we had a lot of, perhaps probably wouldn't be as relevant for these groups, but we had a lot of, like, English is not a first language, and therefore our application form, the language we used really needed to change. We needed to make it more accessible. And we've had groups that do not use the internet for religious purposes or for their sets. They're not online. So therefore we need to be able to have people that can access it from all groups and communities. So we wouldn't have a kind of success rate on terms of applications or what we fund. There is some conversation with our trustees about how we display what we funded this year at the end of the year. Yeah. Again, my view is it's the community, and what each community looks like is different. So therefore, if we were displaying any information, it would be relative and in context to the community that it serves, rather than a case of saying we funded 15% of BAME groups this year, 5% kid groups. But we don't have that yet, but we would be happy to share that by the end of the year.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Okay, so there are a couple more questions, but we're going to hold them for a second. We're going to switch to the Mentimeter. So we do have a few questions for those of you who've joined us, and we're asking if you go to the Mentimeter right now, please, and answer those. I think there are 7 questions. I'm trying to get to it myself. Here we go.
Did I fill this in about me?
You can do.
Fabulous.
Vote for Lynn. Trying to get on it. Ooh. Is everybody on the Menti? I'm struggling. Okay. Okay, give you a couple more seconds and then we're going to wrap up. And if anybody else has a question, just let us know, please.
Hi, Lesmond, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, please. Just a quick one. There are some details that have been shared. For example, the difference between mental health and mental health well-being. I'm not very sure if we shall get such information when the actual time comes, really. Because I saw that people may end up mixing this up.
Okay, so are you asking for the difference between mental health and mental health well-being? Is that correct?
No, I personally understood, but you know, the people in the communities, we are sharing this information.
Yeah.
If it is part of what is documented, it would be good for us to have that, please.
Okay, so Lindsay, basically in the document that you're going to share, does it give a breakdown of what each of the 7 things are, but also what they actually mean? So John's saying, is there a differentiation between mental health and mental well-being?
So we will give the list of what the funding themes are, but there isn't a definition. And I guess because mental health looks different depending on what type of organisation you are, it is very different from well-being. So mental health is the kind of mental state of a person or so, where well-being would be more for like the general need of it. I do think if you, depending on what type of organisation you are, if it was unrestricted, you'd be aware if you were set up mental health as a specific purpose, whilst mental well-being can be a kind of an output of the project where mental health would be the reason for it. Again, if you want to double check any specific ones, then we would encourage you just to kind of get in touch. But we use things like, like the NHS Wellbeing Health. We work with our charity partners that kind of provided and helped us with our assessment criteria. But if I was understanding right, it's if you're articulating it to other groups, then I'd maybe encourage them to get in touch if they wanted to ask a specific question on the difference between mental health and mental well-being.
Okay. John, did that help?
Oh, great, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for your question.
It is a
really
tricky, it's one that we have had a lot of feedback on. And last year we actually did mental health and mental well-being, and we found that there were 2 very different areas. So actually we refined it this year, but we can take any kind of feedback from direct organisations.
Yeah, thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Okay, anybody else? Does anybody else have a question? Don't see anything else in the chat.
I think I've had a couple of questions directly just in regards to the last section I was discussing about people and leadership teams.
Yeah.
The question will make more sense. I probably didn't give it enough justice. We do give a definition in terms of what we mean by a leadership team, and it's just anyone that is making any decisions for your organisation. So even if you're a tiny small group and there is 2 people working in that organisation, then it's anybody in the 2 people, and it doesn't have to be although we were discussing diversity, if that is who your community is, then yes, but it's any kind of inclusion, diversity. It really depends who your community is. And I guess most of the people on this call are from a very specific group. But if you are working with other organisations that are working with different communities, it's really what their organisation. So there's no one answer that we would say, tick, like that's how that's been answered, because it's as much as a learning opportunity for us as it is for you to convey how you represent your service users. I guess a really strong answer for that is if you could let us know what the representation is. So that's what your beneficiaries, and then how that is represented. So if it is if you have volunteers that come to your trustee meetings every quarter and help design the programme for the next 6 months, even though those volunteers are not at a senior level, that is still the representation at decision levels. If you go out and survey your community, if you're getting feedback after sessions, that's how they're involved in making decisions. But there are lots of examples of that. So don't worry if you're a smaller group and that you don't have a director and a CEO and a board of trustees. A lot of groups don't. It's just however you're getting that representation back from your beneficiaries, sorry.
So if I'm a project leader and my group is a group of women and I sit with the women and we design the program, that's
the representation.
In essence, our representation group. Yeah. So thanks for that, because most of the groups here are smaller groups. And yeah. So yeah.
And just to reassure groups, because I had another direct question, and I think this is one of the things we will share at the end of the year, but most of the organisations that apply to us are small, and most of the groups that apply to us are in their first year, and most of the groups that apply to us do not have a professional fundraiser, have never written an application in their life, have never had any kind of funding opportunity, and that's okay, and they still get funded. A lot of groups come from specific niche areas as well, so don't worry if you are only working on a small thing and you think you're too small and tiny. That's why we're the community programs team.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you everybody for your questions. Thank you for your support throughout and for being here today. Everything now is in your hands to make that application. I think Lindsay's given you enough information to do that. We will, once we get the guide, we'll send the guide out to you. Just make sure that you leave your contact details for us, and we'll make sure that we send the guides out to you today, and then you're good to go. As Lindsay said, the questions are on the website already, but the opportunity doesn't open until the 3rd of July, and I believe it's 24 hours. Is that correct?
That's all about 10 a.m.
Yeah, so you can be ahead of the game by looking at the questions, thinking about your answers, thinking about which direction you want to go in, and then you're ready to go by the 3rd, and you know, you'll be more comfortable in completing the questions. Lindsay, did you want to say something?
I was just going to, real quickly, on the application form, there is a question that asks, how did you hear about us? So if anyone is applying on the 3rd of July, if you could put in that you were at the CAHN workshop, then that'd be really great, and I can feed that back to Letismond as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate it.
Sorry, Leslie, I accidentally muted you. Could you please unmute yourself?
Thank you, host. Okay, I think I was talking too much. I get the picture.
If anyone has any specific questions, maybe offline of the call, that didn't want to ask on the call, or it's specific to their applications, then our contact details are on the last slide that I'll send over as well. And feel free just to drop us an email if you want to address it directly to me. My name's Lindsay, but again, small team, everybody will be able to pick it up, and we're happy to discuss anything that you weren't maybe comfortable discussing on the call.
Great. Just want to say thanks again to Lindsay for her support and for taking everybody through. And thank you to all for coming out. And I really do hope that you make the applications. That's the purpose for being here. It's very few funder forums that we have like this, whereby you get the opportunity straight away, more or less, because it's only in a couple of days' time to make your application. So I suggest that you download the application that's already there, have a read through, think about what you're going to do, go ahead and do it. And then on the 3rd, just make sure that you get that in as soon as you possibly can. Every application that you make gives you an opportunity and a chance. Just take your time in doing it and thinking about it, and make a good application. As you know, we are here, happy to help. So if you want any help from myself, please contact myself. Similarly, Lindsay said you've got time to write into themselves and ask any particular things that you're still not sure about. So yeah, once again, thanks to everybody. Take care. Have a great day.
Lovely to meet everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Sam, for your support. Thanks, John and others, Wisdom, and all the CAHN team. Thank you very much indeed. Take care,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.